152, which is, and I'm going to have to look at this again, it is the Imaginal Disc Kit, the interplay of our innate intelligence and conscious imagination. I'm Deborah Henson-Conant. I'm a composer and performer, and I'm here with Kathleen Wiley, who is a Jungian psychoanalyst. We both play the harp, although you wouldn't know that because Kathleen doesn't have hers here today. And so we call this Jung at Harp. And each week we get together to explore something that we have been thinking about during the week. It is a conversation. We don't come here to tell you how it is or because we don't know how it is. We come with a question, not with an answer, to explore through the art of conversation and to explore not only with each other, but also with you. Most of the places that this is streaming to, you can put your thoughts and your questions and your arguments or your new ideas into the chat, and we will be actually able to see them. And we look forward to that. And so Kathleen, shall I start with the imaginal cell and how this came about today?
Yes. Why don't you tell us about the imaginal cell?
Okay. Well, everybody, it's like this. I was having a conversation with my AI the other day, like you do. And I was saying, hey, like when a caterpillar goes into the chrysalis and then it turns to goo, like what creature is that? Is that a caterpillar or is it a butterfly? And AI gets back to me and it says, interesting question, which it so rarely says to me. It says, well, actually, that creature, the caterpillar has within it these cells that are called imaginal cells. And they're there from the very beginning, but it's not until that caterpillar is in the chrysalis and it turns to goo that those cells start to activate. So immediately I'm thinking like, whoa, imaginal and imagination, like is that like the same thing? And then I start thinking, how do I go to goo, and what are these cells? Are they really two creatures, or are these cells part of a, is it a parasite inside the caterpillar? It just gave me so many questions, but it was also so exciting to think about transformation and going to goo. What does it take to go to goo? And so I started exploring that. And I brought that question to Kathleen.
Mm-hmm. So, I want to speak about the Imaginal Disc Kit because when we were talking about this today, that the butterfly has an imaginal disc kit. It's like
the caterpillar.
But the caterpillar and the butterfly are really the same thing because the butterfly is hidden in the caterpillar because of the imaginal disc kit. We could argue.
Right.
But from a Jungian point of view, Jung very much believed that each of our psyches, which is the totality of the living organism we are, both physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, that each of our psyches has a trajectory that our own psychic energy will follow and unfold for us to become the you that we are created to be. And he called this the individuation instinct. And he said that every psyche has its own trajectory, but of course we know there are common it's like a common, like all human beings developmentally follow a same path, but yet we also have specific nuances that are individual to us and unique to us. So that within our psyche, I might argue this morning or hold the position that there is an imaginal disc kit, and that part of the individuation process, the part which means to become whole, is actually discerning that and tapping into that natural trajectory, aligning with it. An image I sometimes use is it's like there is this river flowing in the a current flowing in the river that we're a part of, and how do we get into that flow that's going to take us into the largesse of who we are? And the other side of that is the importance of consciousness and conscious imagination to engage with all of what's going on inside of us so we can learn what is the true flow, and what are artificial directions that get us blocked, that get us stuck, that cause us to smash on the rocks, so to speak.
Yeah, that's so interesting. So you're talking about, I love this, into the largesse.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm fascinated with addiction, and how all addictions, whether it's a substance abuse or a process addiction, how we ultimately end up hiding. We end up in a cage or a cave. And part of the reason I'm fascinated by that is that I started having those images of both freedom and being blocked when I was very young, and then ended up writing The Golden Cage with those images, not even realizing that I was describing an addict self that was hidden, that was hiding itself, and then an ambitious, someone that was so ambitious, so I was hiding. So it's interesting to me because I know that as so the addictive mindset also has almost like an imaginal disc kit that's running you towards what you might call a state, like an existential state of being in which you are trapped. And I'm thinking there's like the imaginal disc kit for freedom, and there's the imaginal disc kit for constriction. And I don't know if it's like, well, gee, I got 2 packages, 2 imaginal disc kits. Which one am I going to open in this life? I don't know. Let's open. Oh, dang, that's the wrong one. Or whether it's like that one is going to unfold, the one that you were talking about, which sounds beautiful, unless something happens to shift you in the other direction. Because I get it that the mindset, like in The Golden Cage, Althea, who's stuck in this cage, and she's created this cage for herself, but unintentionally, she just keeps creating it, even though it's invisible. It doesn't exist.
Yeah. So again, if we're going to talk about it in Jungian terms, Althea gets caught in a fear complex. And that fear complex, that the affect of fear, her fear of the outside world, takes over. And so then she engages in these behaviors that lock her in. So there is a feedback loop that forms, which becomes its own kind of imaginal disc kit. And from a Jungian perspective, we look at historical events, meaning one's own personal history, as well as collective history that informs psyche, that has somehow distorted that natural flow of energy. So it goes into that circular system that's self-defeating. It blocks the larger flow.
Yeah, that's so interesting, because when you said feedback loop, so often when people are working to expand their lives or expand their understanding themselves, one of the first things that they're told to do is to be grateful, to experience gratefulness, to start noticing what is beautiful. And I'm thinking, oh, that's really interesting, because that's an intentional, different kind of feedback loop. Is that what you would say to people as a Jungian? Yeah. How would you tell people to start activating this, their positive imaginal discs?
Yes. So let me just say, what I would do with someone who's in my office and analysis is very different than what I would do in a public presentation or in my embodiment circle, because in one-on-one analysis, I'm really following what their psyche is offering, because that's where the energy is that's going to pull them forward. If I'm in a more teaching capacity, that's different. So I'm going to respond in a more teaching presentation. There's plenty of research that shows that gratitude is a practice that opens the heart, and opening the heart puts us in touch with more of our own potential, as well as other people's potential. So there's a tremendous value in having a practice of gratitude. And alchemically, the alchemists say that everything exists with its opposite. So that if you're caught in a dark place of despair and feeling as if you have nothing, the opposite of that is feeling your largesse and an abundance and that you have everything. So you can struggle to pull yourself out of that dark place of lack, or you can begin to identify with the abundance that is there. So again, the practice of gratitude is one way to do that. And again, in the example I just gave, you would be also utilizing the alchemical wisdom that everything exists with its opposite. So if you want the opposite, start to look for where it's at, because it's all on a continuum.
It's so funny because when you said you can struggle to pull yourself out, and I was like, yeah, but then it's just like that that little thing that they used to call the Chinese finger, whatever, you put your fingers in, but if you try to pull them out, you're just increasing the tension that holds your fingers.
Right.
And I'm thinking that struggle itself
Yes.
becomes the factor that holds you in.
Yes, there's a beautiful story that comes from the Buddhist tradition about the master Milarepa. And it said that Milarepa came back to his cave and it was filled with demons. And they were eating his food and drinking his wine and reading his books and sleeping on his sofa.
That's what happened to me. That's happened.
And he just railed against them and he started yelling at them and chasing them out of his cave. And he said there was this one that was just determined he wasn't going to leave. And after Milarepa had exhausted himself with trying everything, he said to the demon, well, I guess we're going to have to figure out how to live together because it looks like you're not going to leave. And at that moment, the demon left. There's your getting your fingers out of the Chinese
whatever
toy you're talking about.
Yeah.
So it's a paradox that to be able to be present with what is inside of us, even that which blocks us from moving towards what it is that we want, in a way, it allows something to begin to shift and free up. And of course, I'm always saying that, my favorite quote from Jung is, by building a conscious relationship to the unconscious, we can mitigate the negative effects of the unconscious. So if I can build a conscious relationship to my fear, like Althea had about the outside world, or my sense of darkness, that there's nothing more, the paradox is that something then begins to shift and the negative impact that has on me begins to lessen.
It's interesting because one of the journeys that I've been working on with one of my coaches is to expand my listening of myself, to expand. And as you were speaking, you said, be present to what's inside of us, or I think you said something like that, be present. And one of the practices that I've taken on is noticing when I have a fear response or a avoidance response, and just stop for a minute and just actually experience it, and to imagine that it is expanding me from the inside, so that I will have that greater vault. I'm still within it. So this idea of the imaginal, so in the butterfly caterpillar situation, the you get into the chrysalis, and I always imagine the caterpillar gets us like, okay, note to self, make chrysalis, okay, turn to goo, got it, okay, now open disc kit. And then it's like, okay, long. So I don't know how many legs they have. Long 6 legs. I don't know how I'm going to do with only that many legs, but whatever. Proboscis, wings over here, and then they put it together. Wait a minute. Now I'm off on that. What was I trying to say? Okay, forget it. I don't care. I just love thinking about that caterpillar doing that. Okay, help.
But what I want to say is
Yeah.
with the case of the caterpillar, they aren't consciously doing it. It is an innate process in them. And I think this is a piece of our own creative life, as well as the person we are in every area of our life, that there is an innate intelligence in us that knows how to put it all together. And, in AA and 12-step programs, they call that the power greater than the self, greater than the ego self. In Jungian psychology, we talk about it as the self with a capital S, as opposed to the ego, little s
Okay.
self.
All right. So, although I do really like the image of the caterpillar figuring it out, but okay, I hear you. So the question that my first question was, okay, how do I get to goo? And I know in 12 step, there's the fourth step where you take apart, you dismantle, and you start looking at, your fear and your resentment and harms. You take all that stuff that you've been holding, and dismantle it. And, so that something can get in. And I know in the golden cage, Althea is in this cage that has to be somehow dismantled, and it, they finally discover that it is dismantled when someone reaches in and you reach back. It's that connection. And you just talked, when you told the story of the guy with the demons, as you came to the conclusion, I was like, oh, they made friends. There was a conscious making of that connection, of actually choosing to not be alone.
Right. That's right. And again, internally, it is that conscious reaching to the unconscious, which is always reaching to us. It is that connecting to the other half of who we really are, which is the unconscious, non-rational, non-ego driven, created self.
And I'm hearing it. That's really interesting. As you were saying that, you were saying the other side of us. And I was like, well, that's really interesting, because I thought of it, oh, it's the resonance side of us. It's like the resonance of us. I went into an anechoic chamber once, which is a chamber in which there's no resonance to the sound. And so anything you speak is just gone. I mean, it's flat. We just got a comment. So I'm just going to pull it up here, and then we can read it. Oh, here it comes. I believe, says Victoria, we need to look inside first in order to look outside, because we make sense of the outside through our own lens. Does that resonate with you as well? Yes. And I wonder if we can. Like, how do we know when we're looking inside and when we're looking outside? And how do we know?
Well, I always say to people who say to me they don't know, we know, because there's a felt sense in the body. Now, if you're dissociated, you don't know. I mean, I think
that would be me, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is where, again, the embodiment practices that we go through in the essential embodiment practices on online sacred circles are so important, because Victoria, I believe you're right. We have to look inside. And when we look inside, we discover the lens that have formed in response to the outside world, and that may or may not be the truth of the self that we are. We all have lenses that get formed very early in life, when the primitive psyche, when we're infant children, is just responding to the outside world stimulus, and we learn what's right, what's wrong, what's acceptable, what's not, how to be, how not to be. And some of that may very well allow the resonance of our true self to continue to flow. Others of that will block it. And so part of the work of listening is also developing the psychic muscle of discernment to know. And for me, discernment involves the head kind of activity, like the fourth step in the 12-step program, making the fearless and searching moral inventory. But it also is something beyond that. It's kind of like in meditation. Meditation is not any of the techniques you use.
Mm.
Meditation is the state of being, if we quote Patanjali, and an unbroken flow of knowledge of the object that is achieved vis-a-vis the technique. It's not the technique. The technique is a bridge to get into that state. So
I'm thinking about what you're saying, and I'm thinking about that, your embodiment circle, and it's embodying. And I'm thinking
yes.
about, and I don't know if this harp is in tune or not, and I'm thinking about what happens when we find, like, when we find a sound that we love, and that unlocks something. I'm just thinking, that I discovered or fell upon that one day, and it makes me happy. It opens up something in me, and so if I play it, and if I create a song around it, then I can be in that, the feeling of that. And I'm just realizing as we're speaking, on my journey to expand my listening of myself, to expand my experience of myself, it just occurred to me that that's something I can do every day, just to be inside the harmony of that thing that I love, to actually get to engage in something that you love. And I know that when I'm teaching, and I teach snippets, or I teach improvisation, and I'm teaching an idea, but I always tell people, but in that moment when you stumble on the thing that you love, you stumble on it, play it over and over. Just, like be within that and do whatever you need to do to be within that. It never occurred to me that what that does for us. And I was asking, how do we look inside? And I just realized that, this is a window into something, and this is something I love. That note of what it opens. And I know that in Hip Harp Academy, we have one little tiny class that's called Transformational Practices. And it's all about taking something, anything, it could be anything, tiny, and doing it over time, and what opens up because of that. So what I think I'm hearing is that, that by taking on something, a practice of actually feeling love for something, for something we can do, or something that we can hear, that will open up the pathway to what you were talking about. The, what did you call the imaginal disc of who we don't, of who we are.
Yeah, of who we innately are, who we're created to be, who it is that we innately are. And that our own use of conscious imagination can either facilitate that and help that expand in the outside world, or our conscious use of imagination, i.e. negative thinking, replaying the past, getting caught in catastrophic imaging, those things can block that and actually cause us to shrivel. So our conscious imagination has a very important role. And I often see the choice of our conscious imagination illustrated in the story of Milarepa. With our conscious imagination, we can imagine the other as hostile and dangerous and a threat, meaning the other in us, or we can engage with it to say, what is there to learn from this? What is there here that this might be offering me that I need right now?
Wow, I'm thinking, so many things. I'm thinking of the golden cage, and of the reaching in and the reaching back. I'm thinking of the resonance of how beautiful resonance
Mm-hmm.
is. And I'm thinking about the sort of the atrophying of imagination and how that happens. And I was thinking that one of the coaches that I worked with talked about these 5 sort of transit vehicles that take you into addictive thinking, and
Mm-hmm.
they are and they just take it like comparing and despairing, like sand trap thinking, where you keep going over and over and over again the
Mm-hmm.
past, or screenwriting, where you're always like, and in the future this is going to happen, and this is going to happen, and this is going to happen. And there were 5 of them. So comparing, beating yourself down, beating yourself up, beating yourself down. And then finally, what he called negative endowment, which is you just say that sucks, or that doesn't work, or that's
Mm-hmm.
you kind of give up on something, and that will take you into the repetition of imagination, of the imagination getting atrophied into feeling like I'm less than, I'm nothing, people pleasing, all those things. And what I'm hearing here, again, I keep thinking this, that, and that creates the bars of the cage
Mm-hmm.
in which
Mm-hmm.
we're then trapped. And now I'm thinking that even finding one thing to love,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's that harmony, or something beautiful, just finding one thing to love and then engaging in that can open up to the imaginal disc that we may, that's larger than our even larger than our limited imagination, or our.
Yeah, because I want to say this: when we love something, it's because it resonates with us. When we love something, it's uh, acts as like a tuning fork, and we come into the same vibration, and it feels good. It resonates. That's why it feels good. It's not that it's dissonant within us, but there's a harmony. There's a meaning. There's a match, and so. How do we know what's our innate intelligence and what are the distorted patterns? It's because the innate intelligence, it resonates. We just know it, just like we know what we love. And it's hard to describe, but yet it also is a deep felt sense within our body. And so being in our body, listening to our body, listening to the sensations, the subtleties, listening to what our mind does with it, listening to how it shifts our breathing, listening to whether the muscles tighten or stay relaxed, listening to the words that come up. All of these things are key to being able to let the imaginal disc kit that is truly ours to unfold and guide us.
As you were speaking, I was hearing the answer to my question, how do you go to goo? And and it's in, la da 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 dee da. It's in finding something that you love, and doing it over and over and over until just doing it over and over, and just feeling, I mean, sometimes I feel like, well, you can't keep doing that over and over again, but you can keep doing it, and the feeling gets larger and larger. And the beautiful thing about music is that you can create it in a structure in which you've got something else that you go to, and you do that other thing, and then you come back to the thing you love. And it can be so simple. And it's funny because it's a kind of indulgence, but it's an intentional indulgence in love.
Well, it's interesting you use the word indulgence. It's allowing yourself to become one. And in order to become one, there is a gooey state that has to emerge because the separateness has to dissolve. We have to become one with, in this case, the music, the sound, the resonance of
Or
that
the
flow.
or the move or the fun, like, oh,
Yeah,
just like, oh, I love to move this
yeah,
way.
yeah. Because all of those, whether it's the movement or the music or the singing, um, it again is the vehicle into that state of goo that you're wanting. That
Right.
state that allows something to shift from one state to another, from one form to a different form.
Right. Rather than the perpetuation
Mm-hmm.
of the state in which there is no possibility.
Right, right.
So I think I wanted to keep up what Victoria was saying, because I think that within it is so much, how to
Mm-hmm.
look inside. I feel like we were asking that question, and within the question, her question was also part of the answer. Does that resonate?
Right,
Well, and I'm hearing, Kathleen, that you say that's how you know that
right,
you're in that state.
right. That's right. Yeah, yeah.
And I know that trust is part of this as well. And I know that that's a whole other thing. But I just want, as we're saying this, we can't go there right now because it's time to
Yeah.
end. But I do want to, just like, I think I want people to be able to go and watch The Golden Cage, because I'm realizing this is part of this conversation. And so I just want to say that people can go to goldencagemusical.com. I'll try to put it here. And from there, you should be able to click view the show and actually get into the new theater website that
Mm-hmm.
we created. I'll double check it right after this. And I'm going to pull up what Victoria says. Become one. I like that. I was in a retreat working on a project with a couple of friends, and we talked about embodiment.
Yes.
When we become one with what we love and what we want to be, embodiment comes. And I'm thinking embodiment is resonance, is a kind of physical resonance. And I'm also
It's,
thinking, go on,
yeah,
Kathleen,
go ahead.
you're the expert on this. This is what you're.
Well, and it's a resonance that then creates a visible form or action or state. So it's just like with the resonance of the harp. You pluck the string, and there is
Mm,
something experience that you can experience vis-a-vis the physical senses, and that's a piece of what happens when we
mm.
embody. Is that imaginal disc actually unfolds. It unfolds, and it becomes matter. Yeah.
I love this.
Yeah.
Um, I feel like I know how to try this now.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Thank you, Victoria. Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you, Restream, that lets us put this out there. Victoria is saying the word resonance
Yeah.
came up multiple times, and it's beautiful. Yes, it really is. Wow, Kathleen, I'm so glad you're back. I'm really looking forward to seeing where this conversation goes. I'm looking forward to taking this conversation into my meditation, and
Mm-hmm.
meditating with this particular thing that I love,
Yes.
and seeing where it takes me. Thank you for, wow, the window, the book, the conversation this morning. Thank you so much. And thank you for everyone who watches this afterwards and comments to us. It's so beautiful to get to have this conversation with each other and also with you. And I look forward to the next part of it unfolding. I look forward to the unfolding. Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you, Victoria. And we will see you next week.
Mhm.
Yes.